The rain pounded against the darkened windows as Detective Grant Simmons stared at the ominous, sprawling manor before him. Flashes of lightning illuminated the gated community, revealing a world of secrets and shadows. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his gut instinct telling him that this was no ordinary call. "This is it," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the pounding rain. Simmons knew that the exclusive Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association, HOA, was notorious for its iron-fisted control and corrupt practices, but the urgency in the dispatcher's voice had suggested something far more sinister was unfolding. Climbing out of his car, Simmons hurried towards the ornate entrance, his shoes splashing through the puddles. As he approached the towering gates, a sense of unease crept up his spine. The air was thick with tension, and the eerie silence only heightened his suspicion. Pressing the intercom button, Simmons identified himself as a police officer and demanded entry. After a brief, tense exchange, the gates swung open, and he strode purposefully down the rain-soaked, tree-lined driveway towards the sprawling manor. The grand, imposing structure loomed before him, its windows dark and foreboding. Simmons quickened his pace, his mind racing with the possibilities of what he might find inside. As he reached the ornate front doors, they swung open and a well-dressed man stepped out, his expression a mask of carefully cultivated concern. "Detective Simmons, thank you for coming so quickly," the man said, his voice smooth and measured. "I'm Howard Crenshaw, the president of the Oakwood Estates HOA. I'm afraid we have a situation that requires your immediate attention." Simmons narrowed his eyes, sensing the underlying tension in Crenshaw's words. "What kind of situation?" Crenshaw hesitated, his gaze darting around nervously. "Perhaps we should discuss this inside, out of the rain." Nodding, Simmons followed Crenshaw into the opulent foyer, his senses on high alert. The air was thick with an unspoken dread, and the detective couldn't shake the feeling that he had walked straight into a den of secrets and corruption. "What's going on, Mr. Crenshaw?" Simmons asked, his voice low and urgent. Crenshaw cleared his throat, his composure visibly slipping. "It's one of our residents, detective. A young woman, Sarah Wilkins. She's missing." Simmons felt a chill run down his spine. "Missing? When was she last seen?" "Early this evening," Crenshaw replied, his brow furrowed with concern. "She was attending a community meeting at the clubhouse. When the meeting ended, she simply vanished." The detective's mind raced, piecing together the unsettling details. "And you believe she's been abducted?" Crenshaw nodded grimly. "That's what we fear. The HOA board and I have been trying to handle this discreetly, but we felt it was necessary to involve the authorities." Simmons' eyes narrowed, his instincts telling him that Crenshaw was holding something back. "Discreetly? Why not call the police immediately?" Crenshaw hesitated, his expression shifting to one of discomfort. "Well, you see, detective, we had a bit of a disagreement with the local police department earlier this evening. They were asked to leave the premises." Simmons felt a surge of anger and disbelief. "You asked the police to leave? In the middle of a missing persons investigation?" Crenshaw raised his hands placatingly. "Please, detective, I can explain. There were complications, but I assure you the safety and well-being of our residents is our top priority." Simmons stared at the HOA president, his suspicions growing with every passing second. This was no ordinary missing persons case. It was a tangled web of secrets, corruption, and potentially something much more sinister. As the rain continued to batter the windows, Simmons knew that he had stumbled into a high-stakes power struggle, one that would test his skills and resolve to the fullest. With a deep breath, he prepared to delve deeper into the darkness that lurked within Oakwood Estates. The air in the grand foyer was thick with tension as Detective Simmons met Crenshaw's gaze, his mind racing with unanswered questions. "So let me get this straight," Simmons said, his voice low and measured. "You're telling me that the police were asked to leave this community while one of your residents is missing, potentially in danger?" Crenshaw shifted uncomfortably, his carefully cultivated facade of concern slipping. "Detective, I can assure you that the situation is more complex than it may appear. The HOA has certain protocols and security measures in place that we believe are necessary to protect the privacy and safety of our residents." Simmons' eyes narrowed. "And those protocols took precedence over a missing person investigation?" Crenshaw hesitated, his gaze darting around the opulent foyer. "Well, you see, there have been some issues with the local police department in the past. We felt it was best to handle this internally, at least initially." The detective's jaw tightened, his patience wearing thin. "Issues? What kind of issues?" Crenshaw cleared his throat, his composure visibly slipping. "There have been disagreements over the enforcement of our community rules and regulations. The police have, on occasion, interfered with our ability to maintain order and uphold the standards expected of our residents." Simmons couldn't believe what he was hearing. "So you decided to keep the police out of a missing persons case? That's completely unacceptable." Please, detective, understand that we have the best interests of our community in mind, Crenshaw pleaded, his tone now tinged with a hint of desperation. We simply want to resolve this matter discreetly, without causing any unnecessary disruption or alarm. Simmons shook his head in disbelief. Discreet? A woman is missing, Mr. Crenshaw. This is not the time for your HOA's protocols or discretion. I need to speak with the residents, gather information, and coordinate a proper investigation. Crenshaw's eyes widened, and he raised a hand in a placating gesture. I understand your concern, detective, but I must insist that we handle this in a manner that aligns with the HOA's policies and procedures. We have our own security team and resources to draw upon, and I believe they are better equipped to. Enough, Simmons interrupted, his voice sharp and unyielding. This is a missing persons case, and I will handle it as I see fit. Now I need to speak with Sarah Wilkins' family and any other residents who may have information. You will provide me with full access and cooperation, or I will have no choice but to bring in the entire local police force. Crenshaw's face paled, and he opened his mouth to protest, but Simmons cut him off again. I don't care about your disagreements with the police department or your precious HOA protocols. A woman's life is at stake, and I will not allow your petty power struggles to interfere with my investigation. Am I clear? For a moment, Crenshaw seemed to waver, the weight of Simmons' stern gaze bearing down on him. Then, with a reluctant nod, he conceded. Very well, detective. I will ensure that you have our full cooperation. However, I must insist that our own security team accompanies you and your officers throughout the investigation. The safety and privacy of our residents is paramount. Simmons gritted his teeth, but he knew he had little choice. Fine, but I'll be keeping a close eye on your security team. Any interference or obstruction, and I'll have the entire police force here faster than you can blink. Understood? Crenshaw nodded, his expression tight with barely concealed frustration. Understood, detective. Please, follow me. I'll take you to the clubhouse where the community meeting was held. That's where we last saw Sarah Wilkins. As Simmons followed Crenshaw through the grand, dimly lit corridors, his mind raced with possibilities. This was no ordinary missing persons case. It was a high-stakes power struggle with the HOA's shadowy influence at the heart of it all. And he was determined to uncover the truth, no matter what obstacles stood in his way. The narrow, rain-streaked windows of the HOA clubhouse cast an eerie glow over the tense scene as Detective Simmons surveyed the room. Crenshaw's security team hovered nearby, their presence a constant reminder of the HOA's iron grip on the community. Simmons turned to the distraught couple seated on the plush leather sofa, their faces etched with worry and fear. Mr. and Mrs. Wilkins, I understand this is a difficult time, but I need you to walk me through what happened at the community meeting earlier tonight, he said, his voice calm and reassuring. Sarah Wilkins' parents exchanged a worried glance before the father, Robert, spoke up. We were just sitting in the meeting, listening to the usual HOA updates and discussions. Everything seemed normal until the end, when Sarah said she was going to the restroom. His wife, Emily, reached out and gripped his hand, her knuckles turning white. She never came back. We waited and waited, but she just vanished. Simmons nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. Did you notice anything unusual or suspicious before she disappeared? Robert shook his head, his gaze darting towards the silent security team. No, nothing out of the ordinary. The meeting was just like any other. We thought maybe she got held up or something happened to her on her way back. Emily's eyes welled with tears. Oh God, what if she's hurt? What if she's in trouble? Simmons placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We're going to do everything we can to find her, Mrs. Wilkins. But I need you to think carefully. Is there anything in the smallest detail that stood out to you during the meeting? The distraught mother shook her head, her voice trembling. No, I'm sorry. Everything was normal. We've been coming to these meetings for years, and nothing like this has ever happened before. Simmons turned to Crenshaw, who had been observing the exchange with a carefully neutral expression. Mr. Crenshaw, can you provide me with the names and contact information of everyone who attended the meeting tonight? I'll need to speak with them all as part of my investigation. Crenshaw hesitated, his gaze shifting nervously. I'm afraid I can't provide that information, detective. Our residents' privacy is of the utmost importance, and we have strict protocols regarding the disclosure of personal details. Simmons felt a surge of frustration. Mr. Crenshaw, a woman is missing and time is of the essence. I need to speak with everyone who was present at that meeting. Crenshaw raised a hand, his expression uncompromising. I understand your concern, detective, but I simply cannot violate our residents' trust in this manner. Our security team will assist you in reaching out to the appropriate individuals, but I cannot hand over their personal information. Simmons clenched his jaw, his temper rising. This is unacceptable. I don't have time to jump through your HOA's hoops. I need unfettered access to conduct a proper investigation, and I need it now. Crenshaw's eyes narrowed, his tone becoming increasingly defensive. Detective, I'm afraid I cannot compromise the privacy and security of our community, regardless of the circumstances. The HOA has its own protocols and processes in place to handle such matters. Simmons opened his mouth to retort, but a soft, trembling voice interrupted him. Excuse me, detective. He turned to see a young woman, her eyes red-rimmed and her hands shaking. I was at the meeting tonight. I might have seen something. Simmons felt a surge of hope, but Crenshaw quickly stepped in, his expression hardening. Now, Ms. Jameson, there's no need to involve yourself in this investigation. Our security team will handle any necessary follow-up. Simmons glared at the HOA president, his patience wearing thin. Ms. Jameson, I'd like to speak with you. Privately. As the young woman approached him, Simmons knew he was on the verge of a breakthrough. The HOA's attempts to obstruct his investigation only fueled his determination to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The rain pounded against the windows as Detective Simmons led the young woman, Ms. Jameson, to a quiet corner of the clubhouse. Crenshaw and his security team hovered nearby, their watchful eyes a constant reminder of the HOA's unyielding control. Simmons turned to Ms. Jameson, his expression earnest. All right, Ms. Jameson, what did you see at the meeting tonight? The young woman's gaze darted nervously towards the security team before she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I am not sure if it's relevant, but I thought I saw something strange. Simmons leaned in, his attention focused. Anything you can tell me could be important. Please don't hold back. Ms. Jameson took a deep breath, her hands trembling. Well, towards the end of the meeting, I noticed one of the security guards, Mr. Reeves, leaving the room. He seemed agitated and he was talking on his radio, almost whispering. Simmons felt a spark of interest. Did you hear what he was saying? The young woman shook her head regretfully. No, I couldn't make it out, but he left the room in a hurry, and he seemed, I don't know, nervous maybe. Simmons' brow furrowed in thought, and this was right around the time that Sarah Wilkins disappeared. Ms. Jameson nodded. Yes, I think so. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now with Sarah missing. Simmons placed a reassuring hand on her arm. You did the right thing by coming forward, Ms. Jameson. This could be an important lead. Suddenly, Crenshaw's voice cut through the air, his tone sharp and commanding. That's enough, Ms. Jameson. I believe we've taken up enough of the detective's time. Our security team will handle any further questioning. Simmons turned to the HOA president, his eyes narrowed. I'm now finished speaking with Ms. Jameson. She may have crucial information for my investigation. Crenshaw's expression hardened. I'm afraid I must insist, detective. As I've stated, our residents' privacy and security are our top priorities. We have our own means of handling this matter. Simmons felt a surge of frustration. Mr. Crenshaw, you're obstructing a police investigation. I don't care about your priorities. I need to speak with Ms. Jameson and any other witnesses, and I need to do it without interference from your security team. Crenshaw's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Simmons thought he might push the issue further. But then the HOA president's expression shifted, a faint hint of a smile playing on his lips. Very well, detective. If you insist on speaking with Ms. Jameson, then I suppose we have no choice but to cooperate. However, I must insist that our security team remain present for the safety and comfort of our residents. Simmons clenched his fists, his patience wearing thin. Fine, but I want unfettered access to everyone who was at that meeting, and I want it now. Crenshaw inclined his head slightly. Of course, detective. Our security team will assist you in reaching out to the appropriate individuals. As Simmons turned back to Ms. Jameson, he couldn't shake the feeling that Crenshaw was playing some sort of game, one that he didn't fully understand. The HOA president's sudden compliance was suspicious, and Simmons knew he had to tread carefully. Steeling himself, he prepared to delve deeper into the mystery, determined to uncover the truth, no matter what obstacles the HOA placed in his path. The air in the clubhouse was thick with tension as Detective Simmons interviewed witness after witness, each one providing fragments of information that only served to deepen the mystery. Despite the presence of Crenshaw's security team, Simmons pressed on, his relentless questioning chipping away at the HOA's carefully crafted facade of control. And you didn't notice anything out of the ordinary during the meeting? Simmons asked, his gaze fixed on the middle-aged woman sitting across from him. The woman, Mrs. Henderson, shook her head, her brow furrowed with concern. No, detective, everything seemed normal. We were just going over the usual community updates and announcements. Simmons leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. Think carefully, Mrs. Henderson. Anything at all? A strange look, a whispered conversation, an unexplained absence. Mrs. Henderson hesitated, her eyes darting towards the security team before she spoke again. Well, now that you mention it, I did notice one of the security guards, Mr. Reeves, leaving the room midway through the meeting. He seemed agitated, I suppose. Simmons felt a surge of triumph, his mind racing. Did you happen to see where he went or hear what he was saying? The woman shook her head regretfully. I'm afraid not, detective. He just left in a hurry, and I didn't think much of it at the time. Simmons nodded, jotting down a few notes. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Your information is valuable, and I appreciate your honesty. As the witness stepped away, Simmons turned to Crenshaw, who had been observing the proceedings with a carefully neutral expression. Mr. Crenshaw, I'd like to speak with this Mr. Reeves as soon as possible. His actions seem to be a key piece of this puzzle. Crenshaw's brow furrowed, and he cleared his throat, his voice measured. I'm afraid that won't be possible, detective. Mr. Reeves is currently unavailable for questioning. Simmons felt a surge of frustration. Unavailable? What do you mean? Crenshaw's gaze shifted, and for a moment, Simmons thought he detected a flicker of unease in the HOA president's expression. Mr. Reeves has been relieved of his duties effective immediately. He is no longer associated with the Oakwood Estates security team. Simmons stared at Crenshaw, his mind racing. So, you're telling me that a potential witness to a missing persons case has been dismissed from his position? Why? Crenshaw's jaw tightened, and he glanced towards his security team as if seeking their support. I'm afraid I can't discuss the details of Mr. Reeves' dismissal. It was a private matter between the HOA and our former employee. Simmons felt a surge of anger, his patience wearing thin. Private matter? A woman is missing, and this man may have been involved. I need to speak with him, Mr. Crenshaw, and I need to do it now. Crenshaw raised a hand, his expression hardening. I'm sorry, detective, but that simply isn't possible. Mr. Reeves is no longer under our employ, and we have no way to compel him to cooperate with your investigation. Simmons clenched his fists, his mind racing. Then I'll get a warrant. You can't just make a potential witness disappear, especially in the middle of a missing persons case. Crenshaw's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Simmons thought he saw a flash of triumph in the HOA president's gaze. By all means, detective, pursue a warrant if you must. However, I must remind you that Oakwood Estates is a private community, and we have certain rights and protocols that must be respected. I can assure you that we are cooperating fully with your investigation, within the bounds of our own policies and procedures. Simmons stared at Crenshaw, his frustration mounting. The HOA president was clearly playing a game, one that Simmons was struggling to understand. But he knew he couldn't back down, not when a woman's life was at stake. Steeling himself, Simmons prepared to take his fight to the next level, determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The rain continued to pelt the windows of the HOA clubhouse as Detective Simmons paced the floor, his mind racing with a seemingly endless stream of unanswered questions. Despite his relentless efforts, the investigation had hit one roadblock after another, each obstacle erected by the Oakwood Estates HOA and its infuriatingly elusive president, Howard Crenshaw. Simmons paused, his gaze falling on the security team that hovered near the entrance, their presence a constant reminder of the HOA's iron grip on the community. This isn't right, he muttered under his breath, his frustration boiling over. They're hiding something, and I'm going to find out what. Turning on his heel, Simmons strode over to Crenshaw, who was deep in conversation with one of the security guards. Mr. Crenshaw, I need to speak with you. Privately. The HOA president's expression darkened, but he nodded, gesturing for the guard to leave. Very well, detective. What is it? Simmons wasted no time, his voice low and urgent. This investigation of yours is a sham, isn't it? You've been stonewalling me at every turn, and now you've conveniently disappeared a potential witness. What are you trying to hide? Crenshaw's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Simmons thought he saw a flicker of panic in the older man's gaze. I assure you, detective, we are doing everything in our power to cooperate with your investigation. However, as I've mentioned, we have certain protocols and policies that we must abide by. Simmons shook his head in disgust. Protocols? This isn't about protocols, Crenshaw, and you know it. You're trying to bury something, and I'm going to find out what it is. The HOA president's expression hardened, and he leaned in, his voice a low hiss. You are treading on very dangerous ground, detective. This is a private community, and we have the right to maintain our own security and privacy measures. I suggest you tread carefully. Simmons felt a surge of defiance, his jaw tightening. I don't care about your rights, Crenshaw. A woman is missing, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to find her. Now tell me what you're hiding, or I'll have the entire police force swarming this place, and I'll make sure the media gets wind of this little power struggle of yours. Crenshaw's gaze darted around the room, his composure slipping. You have no idea what you're up against, detective. This community is more than just a collection of homes, it's a carefully constructed ecosystem with its own rules and hierarchy. And I won't let you jeopardize that, no matter what. Simmons narrowed his eyes, sensing a weakness in the HOA president's facade. So you're admitting there's something to hide? What is it, Crenshaw? What are you and your cronies so desperate to keep under wraps? Crenshaw's lips tightened into a thin line, and for a moment, Simmons thought he might finally get a straight answer. But then the older man's expression shifted, a faint smile playing on his lips. You know, Detective, I admire your tenacity, but I'm afraid I can't give you the answers you're looking for. You see, this community operates based on a delicate balance of power, and I can't risk obstructing that no matter the cost. Simmons felt a surge of frustration, his patience wearing thin. So you're willing to let an innocent woman suffer for the sake of your precious power balance? That's absolutely unacceptable. Crenshaw shrugged, his expression almost casual. I'm sorry, Detective, but my responsibility is to this community, not to any individual. And if that means making difficult choices, then so be it. Simmons stared at the HOA president, his mind racing with a mix of disbelief and determination. He knew he was running out of options, but he also knew that he couldn't give up, not when a life was at stake. Steeling himself, Simmons prepared to take his investigation to the next level, determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The air in the HOA clubhouse was thick with tension as Detective Simmons faced off against the unyielding Howard Crenshaw. The HOA president's cold indifference towards the missing Sarah Wilkins filled Simmons with a sense of righteous fury, fueling his determination to uncover the truth. So that's it then, Simmons growled, his voice low and dangerous. You're willing to let an innocent woman disappear, all to protect your precious power balance in this community. Crenshaw's expression remained calm, but Simmons could detect a faint flicker of unease in the older man's gaze. Detective, I understand your frustration, but this is a complex situation that goes far beyond the simple disappearance of one individual. The well-being of this entire community is at stake, and I have a responsibility to protect it, no matter the cost. Simmons shook his head in disgust. Protect it? You're more concerned with maintaining your own power and control than you are with the safety of the people who live here. And you're willing to sacrifice an innocent life to do it. Crenshaw's jaw tightened and his eyes narrowed. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Detective. This community is more than just a collection of homes. It's a carefully constructed ecosystem with its own rules and hierarchy. And I won't let you jeopardize that, no matter what. Simmons felt a surge of anger, his hands clenching into fists. Rules and hierarchy. This isn't some corporate boardroom, Crenshaw. This is a missing persons case, and I'm not going to let you play your twisted little power games with a woman's life. The HOA president's expression hardened, and he took a step closer to Simmons, his voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. You think you can just waltz in here and start making demands, Detective? This is our community, our domain. And we have ways of dealing with those who threaten our way of life. Simmons felt a chill run down his spine, but he refused to back down. Are you threatening me, Crenshaw? Because if you are, I can assure you that it won't end well for you or your little HOA empire. Crenshaw's lips curled into a faint smile, and he gestured towards the silent security team hovering nearby. I'm not threatening you, Detective. I'm merely reminding you of the consequences of overstepping your bounds. Simmons glanced at the security guards, his mind racing. He knew he was playing a dangerous game, but he also knew that he couldn't back down, not when Sarah Wilkins' life was on the line. Fine, he said, his voice low and steady. If that's the way you want to play it, then so be it. But I promise you, Crenshaw, I won't stop until I uncover the truth, no matter what it takes. The HOA president's smile widened, then he nodded. I admire your tenacity, Detective, but I can assure you, you have no idea what you're up against. This community is more than just a collection of homes. It's a carefully constructed fortress, and we have no intention of letting anyone breach our walls. Simmons felt a surge of determination, his mind racing with a plan. We'll see about that, Crenshaw. Because I'm not going to stop until I find Sarah Wilkins, and I'm going to bring down your entire corrupt HOA empire in the process. Crenshaw's expression darkened, and he opened his mouth to respond, but Simmons cut him off. Stave it, Crenshaw. I'm done playing your games. From now on, it's war. With that, Simmons turned on his heel and strode towards the exit, his mind already whirring with a plan to outmaneuver the HOA and uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The rain had finally let up as Detective Simmons stood outside the Oakwood Estates clubhouse, his gaze fixed on the imposing manor that loomed in the distance. The air was thick with tension, and Simmons knew that he was on the verge of a breakthrough or a catastrophic downfall. He had pushed the HOA to the brink, and he knew that Crenshaw and his cronies would not hesitate to fight back with everything they had. But Simmons was determined, his mind racing with a plan that could turn the tables on the corrupt community. Taking a deep breath, Simmons made his way back to his car, his fingers gripping the steering wheel with a renewed sense of purpose. He had to move quickly before the HOA could retaliate and bury the truth forever. Gunning the engine, Simmons sped away from the gated community, his mind focused on one objective: finding Sarah Wilkins, no matter the cost. As he raced through the rain-slicked streets, Simmons dialed a familiar number, his voice urgent and commanding. This is Detective Simmons. I need to speak with the district attorney, immediately. It's a matter of life and death. The line crackled with static, but Simmons could hear the sense of urgency in the dispatcher's voice. Right away, detective. Hold, please. Moments later, a gruff voice cut through the line. This is the district attorney. What's the situation, Simmons? Simmons wasted no time. I'm working a missing persons case in Oakwood Estates, and I need your help. The HOA is stonewalling me at every turn, and I believe they're involved in the disappearance of one of their residents. The district attorney's voice was tense. Oakwood Estates, huh? That's a tough nut to crack. What exactly are you asking for? I need a warrant ASAP, Simmons replied, his foot pressing harder on the accelerator. I need to search the entire community, and I need the full backing of the district attorney's office to do it. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Simmons could almost hear the gears turning in the district attorney's mind. Simmons, you do realize the kind of hornet's nest you're about to kick, don't you? Oakwood Estates is practically its own fiefdom, and the HOA has some powerful friends in high places. Simmons gritted his teeth, his determination unwavering. I don't care, ADA, a woman's life is at stake, and I'm not going to let the HOA's corruption and cover-up stand in my way. I need that warrant, and I need it now. Another pause, and then a resigned sigh. All right, Simmons, I'll put a rush on it, but you better have your ducks in a row. This is going to be a hell of a fight. I'm ready for it, Simmons growled, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Just get me that warrant, and I'll handle the rest. As the line went dead, Simmons felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. He knew that he was about to go to war with the most powerful and well-connected community in the city, but he also knew that he had no choice. Gripping the steering wheel tighter, Simmons reached for his radio, his voice clear and authoritative. This is Detective Simmons. I need to mobilize every available unit in the district. We're going to execute a search warrant at Oakwood Estates, and I want every corner of that community turned upside down. We're going to find Sarah Wilkins, no matter what it takes. The radio crackled to life, and Simmons could hear the sound of sirens in the distance, a symphony of justice and determination. As he raced towards the gated community, Simmons knew that he was about to unleash a storm that would shake the very foundations of Oakwood Estates, and he was ready to face whatever came his way because he was fighting for more than just a missing person. He was fighting for the truth and for the very soul of the community itself. The stage was set, and the final act was about to begin.